The EV revolution is bringing with it plenty of firsts, and this big boy is another one. Meet the Mercedes-Benz EQS 450, which the brand describes as its first fully electric, full-size premium SUV with 7 seats, all of which is a little bit of a mouthful, so let's shortcut that, shall we? What you really need to know is that this is one of the few all-electric 7-seaters currently on sale in Australia, which means it will soon go head-to-head, a little surprisingly, with vehicles like the Kia EV9. So let's go see what Mercedes is bringing to the EV SUV party.
Now, arguably the biggest hurdle the EQS 450 has to clear is its asking price, which is a considerable $194,900 before on-road costs. And that is a significant ask even for a flagship electric SUV. Still, it's all very luxurious inside. You'll find leather seats and trim, a big 12.8-inch central screen, and a heads-up display, and a second giant digital instrument display. You get a very good sound system with 15 speakers, a panoramic sunroof, and cooling and heating in the front seats. Now outside there are 21-inch alloys, flush-fitting door handles, illuminated running boards, and what Benz calls digital lighting, which offer 1.3 million pixels of light per headlight and sound like it should be enough to see not just the road ahead but well into the future.
Now it is a handsome SUV, this EQS, and one that's actually not immediately recognizable as electric, not least of which because the brand has included these little design flourishes at the back, which are actually supposed to look a little bit like exhaust pipe exits, which of course this doesn't need. Now, Australian spec cars get the AMG design treatment as standard. That brings with it the AMG wheels, the silver and black side steps, and the powered dome bonnet. And of course, as is par for the course these days, the door handles are flush and emerge from the doors when you unlock the vehicle.
Inside, it is a super comfy space to spend time. In fact, the little head pillows that come standard should be in every single car everywhere, and the tech on offer is ample. But it does all feel a little gigantic with these great swathes of wood paneling and these massive screens, all of which make you feel a little bit like you've been shrunken down and are now living in a world of giants. The EQS 450 stretches just over 5.1 meters in length, just over 1.9 meters in width, and just over 1.7 meters in height. And that's about the size of a Nissan Patrol, and certainly enough to make this a proper 7-seater. Now, USB charge points abound, and there's wireless device charging, and because of the sheer size of the cabin, the storage options are plentiful. The central bin between the front seats, for example, appears to have been modeled on the Grand Canyon.
Now, as you can see, life in the second row is pretty good as well. I'm 175 centimeters. I'm sitting behind my own driving position. I've got miles of knee room, miles of headroom, and this big glass roof makes it feel nice and light and airy back here as well. And if it gets a little too hot, you don't only get air vents, but your own temperature controls back here as well. So electrifying everything is great, and it certainly makes life easy, but gosh, it can slow things down slightly. This is the process for getting into the third row. You pull this little button here and both seats shift forward automatically and out of the way, leaving you a pretty clear path to step into the back seat, although some acrobatics are still required. I've got to say though, and perhaps a little surprisingly for a car this big, life in the third row of seats is still fairly unpleasant and mildly claustrophobic kind of affair. Now the middle row is fully adjustable, you can move it forward and back, but when it's got adults in it, you're going to find your knees are pressing up against the back of this middle row, and just because of the tiny windows, it just feels a little dark and a little tight back here. So even in a car this size, the third row is really reserved for kids.
There are 2 electric motors delivering the driving power, one at the front axle and one at the rear, which deliver a combined 265 kilowatts and 800 newton meters, fed through a single-speed transmission and with all 4 wheels being powered, and that's enough to deliver a sprint to 100 kilometers an hour of 6 seconds. There's also a huge 107.8 kilowatt hour battery on board, delivering the EQS 450 a driving range of 483 kilometers. And when it comes time to plug in, you'll find the EQS is set up with 200 kilowatt DC fast charging, which should see you go from 10 to 80% charge in just 31 minutes.
Now, as you can probably see out the windows, we're not on a road, but on a racetrack, Sydney Motorsport Park, in fact, but that's really just to make this part of the video a little bit easier. We did spend a number of hours behind the wheel of this on actual Sydney roads yesterday, and typical Sydney roads, bad, broken, dodgy road surfaces, so I can tell you what this is like to actually live with. And I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but I gotta say there is something utterly unremarkable about the drive experience in this car, and I don't actually mean that in a super negative way. I just mean that it does pretty much exactly what you might expect a luxury electric SUV to do, and feels like you would expect it to feel. But again, I don't want that to come across in a negative way. It is a super comfortable drive experience, but it's also super quiet. Mercedes has actually employed a couple of different types of sound deadening to keep the noise in the cabin to an absolute minimum, and with the windows up, it really is super quiet from behind the wheel. Now, acceleration 0 to 100 is around 6 seconds, so it's not lightning quick, although certainly quick for a vehicle this big and this heavy, and at no stage does it feel underpowered. So I'll come to a complete stop here, just as though I was pulling out onto a main road, plant my foot. That's 60, 70 with ease. So not lightning quick, it's not going to push your head too far back into the seat, but it certainly feels ample for a car this size. Also surprising for a car this size is that it manages to hide its weight pretty well. I mean, you're always aware of it, it's always lurking in the back of your mind, of course, but when you do tip into corners, it stays nice and flat. It doesn't feel like you're dragging a block of flats around with you. It kind of holds the road quite nicely. The steering too is typically pretty good, and in fact it employs a rear wheel steering system to make a vehicle this long feel a little bit more mobile in the city. There's an argument, I suppose, that electrification has done more for premium vehicles than it has for any other, because obviously the biggest challenge those companies faced was keeping engine noise and road noise out of the car. But with an electric vehicle, of course, you just focus on deadening the road noise, and everything else is fairly smooth, fairly constant, and fairly easy to live with, and this vehicle is absolutely no exception. It also benefits, I suppose, from the fact that there's really not a lot of competition in the 7-seat electric SUV space in Australia, but that will change soon with the incoming Kia EV9. And it's not often we'd say that a Kia product is going to go head-to-head with a Mercedes product, but in the case of the EV9 and this, they really will. But road manners aside, it is a typically Benz experience in here. The screens are big, the tech is everywhere, it's very comfortable, the interior finishings are very nice, so it ticks a lot of those boxes as well. But of course, you will pay for it at almost $200,000 before on-road costs. It's not cheap.
You can also expect an extensive suite of active safety equipment, including AEB with pedestrian and cyclist detection and junction assist, adaptive cruise, active lane keep assist, lane change assist, steering assist, the list goes on and on. The Mercedes EQS 450 is covered by Merck's standard 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, with servicing required every 12 months or 25,000 Ks. Now you can prepay your servicing costs, and that number comes in at $4,280 for the first 5 years. The battery is covered for 8 years or 160,000 kilometres. So does electrification enhance the 7-seat SUV experience? In the case of the EQS 450, the answer is yes. Smoother, quieter, and with plenty of easy flowing power, the brand's family-focused luxury electric SUV behaves exactly as you might expect it to.